I'm presenting tonight on the article "The Party's Over: The Crisis of Left Electoralism" by Kim Moody of Labor Notes. I'll also be drawing a lot from another article that was published in the International Socialist Review that is called "More Than a Ballot Line: The Democratic Party, Class Struggle, and the Socialist Left Today," written by Bill Crane. And I'm also going to draw a lot on my own personal experience as somebody who spent a lot of years very deeply involved in local democratic electoralism here in Colorado. So, with the rise of many left-leaning prominent politicians like Bernie Sanders, the Squad, there's been a lot of discussion about how useful elections are for socialist organizing and what might be the best way to use that tool. Tonight, I will be arguing that they are not super useful, and whatever use they may have had is dwindling as the infrastructure progressive Dems have built seems to be imploding right now. All while Democratic voters are losing confidence and enthusiasm for the Democratic Party and our system of government as a whole. So in his article, Moody lays out a very convincing case for this. He details how organizations that exist to help get left-leaning Democrats elected, things like the Justice Dems, Emily's List, Our Revolution, they are kind of hemorrhaging money right now. They've got big financial problems. They're not able to raise the kind of money they once were. They are laying off staff like crazy. They're working with fewer and fewer campaigns. Cat's going crazy in the background here. Sorry. And they're straight up refusing to work with any campaigns that are running against incumbents. Those races are just too hard and expensive to win, and they've got to conserve their dwindling resources. Similarly, prominent progressives that are already in office, people like Bernie, AOC, all of them, they're doing fewer and fewer endorsements now. These orgs they no longer can bring in the donations they used to, so they have to be a lot more selective about which campaigns they support. Meanwhile, more conservative Democratic candidates and organizations are not struggling to the same degree. This should be highly concerning for any socialist who thinks we could change things if only we can elect enough left-leaning Democrats. Moody details the specific numbers surrounding all of this very well in his article. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you go back and look at it if you want the stats. For now, I'm not super interested in regurgitating all the information he already laid out. Instead, I'd kind of like to talk about the why of all of this. Why do progressive Dems and the orgs that support them, why are they having such a hard time raising the money that they need? Why do we need money at all to win elections? And why aren't voters excited about progressive and left-leaning campaigns anymore? So when I talk about this with friends and neighbors and just regular people in my everyday life, which I do a lot, what always comes up with them is, would it help to get money out of politics? Would that solve the issue? And the answer to that is kind of complicated. Money absolutely plays a major role in why it's difficult for left-leaning candidates to win elections, and Moody really focuses on this a lot in his article. It probably is the biggest obstacle for left-leaning politicians to get past. Money is how you get voters to know you exist and learn what you stand for. It's how you get your message in front of voters' eyes. And if you don't have it, most voters are never going to know you exist. Moody points out very correctly that while there is an idea that you don't need big money to win an election, the fact of the matter is that the candidate with the most money wins 90% of the time. Unfortunately, left-leaning candidates have a much harder time raising large sums of money for campaigns than their conservative Democrat and Republican opponents do. This is because of the class interests of the big dollar donors. The capitalist class is not motivated to change the current system, especially not changes that result in giving more power to working class people. So they're going to invest in candidates who will either maintain the status quo or make it more favorable to them. They will invest in the most conservative candidate they believe has a shot of getting elected. And sometimes that's a Republican, sometimes it's a Democrat. It just kind of depends on the race, right? And I could talk about this for hours. I was saying before the meeting started that I had originally written just pages and pages of stuff. Um, I had 4 pages just going into detail on the roles money plays in elections, but that seems like overkill for this presentation. If you really want to chat about it sometime, I'm here for it, but you will get an earful, so be prepared for that. But I spent a lot of years personally thinking it was possible to build a progressive bench, right? And that we could focus on these local offices, and one day all of the ghouls up in higher office are going to die, right? Like, I guess they could retire, but probably death is going to be what takes them out of office. And when that day comes, if we have this left leaning bench, then we're going to have all these great candidates and they'll finally make the change that we need. It was only after several years of watching how the sausage gets made and participating in making the sausage a little bit myself that I kind of started to realize how futile all of it is. We are never going to elect enough left-leaning politicians to make meaningful change. The system we have just won't allow it, no matter how popular these ideas are with average people. And then you've got to keep in mind that getting people elected is just the first step, right? 90% of the time, the candidate with the most money wins, but 10% of the time, we do get left-leaning candidates into office, but once they're there, they have to actually govern. And that presents an entirely new set of challenges. Any progressive Democrat elected will have to work with other electeds to get anything done while in office, and most of the other electeds they're working with will be vastly more conservative than they are. In order to accomplish any policy goals, they'll have to convince their peers or compromise with them on various issues, and do all of this within a system that is designed to resist and minimize any change to how it functions. The fact of the matter is that left-leaning politicians who stay true to their values tend to be ineffective and they don't get a whole lot done. Those who compromise are rewarded with better fundraising opportunities in their next campaign, and this is why success in politics tends to be inherently de-radicalizing. We should not be surprised then to see a lack of enthusiasm from Democratic voters after years of watching the candidates they were once excited about either sell out or accomplish nothing. Moody covers this too. And again, I want to encourage you all to go back and read the original article if you have it, because he details the many surveys that showed that Democratic voters are just not feeling great about their party. At best, they feel unenthusiastic, and, at worst, they feel straight up disappointed and angry. And this isn't because left-leaning and progressive ideas are unpopular, because we know that they are. Surveys also tell us that all the time. And it's also certainly not because we've tried these policies and they didn't work, right? They haven't been tried at all. It's because voters have lost hope that politicians will deliver on the things people are asking for them, on the things that often politicians are saying they're going to do, and then they don't do it for a variety of reasons. Socialists are not going to fix any of that by pouring more time, energy, and resources into an electoral process that is designed to co-opt and neutralize our ideas and de-radicalize our most fervent activists. Fundamentally, the issue with our government is not simply that we don't have enough left-leaning politicians in it. The issue is how the system itself functions. How it functions by its very nature is antithetical to socialist ideals, and attempting to infiltrate it, to change it from the inside using individual actors, no matter how good they are, is never going to be successful. This is not the first time we have tried this, and in the other article I read, More Than a Ballot Line by Bill Crane, he details other attempts that the American left have made to kind of join forces with Democrats and try to use electoralism to advance socialist goals. And they all failed, spoiler alert, and it was pretty much for the same reason. They went into it thinking that they could use the platform to advance their ideals, use this infrastructure that the Democratic Party has set up already, and what ends up happening is the opposite. The Democrats will co-opt all their messages to appeal to a wider voter range, and then they abandon those voters once they get into office, and none of the progressive stuff gets done. So I know, all the time, when I'm having these conversations with people, the response is like, what's the alternative? There's nothing else we could do. What are you saying? We should just do nothing and give up. And obviously, I hope everyone here knows that's not the case at all. Both Moody and Crane discuss the importance of building mass movements outside of electoralism. And I think they're right about that. However, it's my experience that most people hear that and they don't really understand what it means. Isn't that what elections are? Aren't elections just a mass movement to get people into office? And sort of, right? An election campaign certainly can be a movement, but more often than not, it's closer to a marketing campaign. Its goal is always just getting a candidate to win, and it ends the minute the election is over, whether the candidate wins or loses, right? It does nothing to ensure that any policy is enacted once a candidate is elected. And to me, I think the most troubling thing is that movements centered around electoral campaigns are kind of individualistic and they divide us. So if you look at Bernie Sanders' campaign when he ran for president, right? People were really drawn to it because it felt exciting and hopeful, and everybody felt like they were part of this movement, right? But you can't do that with every individual candidate in every race in this country because there are thousands of candidates, right? And people only have the capacity to be an active member of so many movements. Uh, so if every candidate is their own movement, most of those movements are not going to take off, especially at the bottom. In a lot of the way, these movements around elections are kind of a pyramid scheme where all the high level races at the federal level steal all the resources and there's no resources being left for the bench building that we are allegedly trying to do by getting leftists elected, right? Um, the mass movement we needs to, and this is where things might fall apart a little bit here because I never finished a conclusion. But what we need is a movement that is focused on an issue. An issue doesn't go away until meaningful action has been taken on that issue, right? And it spans across, the locations where you live and who's running for office. It spans across time. We need to find issues that bring all of us together. So Moody, I know Moody in his article really focused on labor movements, which I think is great. Obviously, we're really supportive of labor movements, but they can get swept up in electoralism themselves. So we should be cautious about that. I know that Bill Crane talked a lot about like Black Lives Matter. He historically he talked about the anti-war movement in the 60s and obviously the Palestine movements now. These are all things that continue no matter what happens in an election, right? You don't stop. The movement doesn't end until the issue is addressed. And those are the kinds of things that are more productive for socialists to focus on and to put their energy into as we're organizing the working class.